Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to day something of lockdown. Today's video is a bit of a sad one, but when you hear my guest talk, you'll realise it's actually going to be a bit of a happy one because Norman Hunter, a great Leeds United player, died yesterday, aged 76 from the coronavirus. And after listening to some of the tributes, doing some research and a little chat with the guy opposite me, I do think he merits a show on a frankly ridiculous career. So we've got a lot of Leeds fans here. So if I can introduce David Dymond from the Blue Monday podcast,
Ben?
I'll out you as an Ipswich fan now. You're the same as me, but Dave is a fantastic historian, particularly of
Okay.
this era, because the Revy era just slightly
Yeah.
predates the Robson. But Dave, just quickly introduce yourself and what's your vintage as a fan, and because I know you're going to provide great insight on this.
Yeah, well, obviously, I won't totally give my age away, but my when I say this, it probably will. So I saw my first Ipswich game as a as a 7-year-old in 1970. So there you go. Um, so yeah, obviously getting big into football then. Ipswich were obviously just getting established in the top first division as it was then in pounds, shillings, and pence, the top division under Robson. And yeah, at the time, this really coincided. Probably, yeah, 1970, getting towards the middle of the Revy era at Leeds, and the great Leeds side. All right, actually they'd won the championship the year before. We'll get to that, but yeah. So I remember this era so well, and just the really great Leeds side that it was. That ironically, and I'm sure Leeds fans out there won't mind me saying this, everyone liked to hate in some respects because of, I don't know, because of the Don Revy, and call it, I know they always had the tag of dirty Leeds. I seem to think it was more professional Leeds. They were really professional in everything they did, and I mean, we'll get onto that. But yeah, fond memories. What a side, and
So
what a player, Norman Hunter.
yeah, so we're going to try and parlay. This is a celebration of Norman Hunter's career, but it ends up you can't really separate him from
No.
Don Revy. So yeah, we're paying tribute to Norman Hunter. Dave and I are both Ipswich fans, so we apologise in advance if there's any slight factual errors
Yeah,
in there.
I think they've got interspersed a bit. Yeah.
Let us know in the comments, but we come from a position of absolute respect for a
No.
great player and a great team. So Dave, he's born in 1943, joins Leeds in 58. Interestingly, he's 15 when he joins Leeds. It's the same year that Revy comes as a player, and you find during this story we can't separate Revy and
I mean, Revy,
Hunter.
yeah, Revy was a good player. Good player. Man played, cup final, cup winning. I think he was cup winning captain for Man City. So had a good, a very good career. So yeah, and made that move. Obviously made that move then to Leeds, and then obviously consequently into management with Leeds.
And Leeds have never won a major honour at this point. We need to point out in 1960, Real Madrid beat Eintracht Frankfurt 7-3, wearing the all-white kit in the
Yeah.
European Cup final, which apparently Don Revy was obsessed with and would make people watch the game. He takes over as manager in 1961, kind of like you said, as a bit of a cheap option, really. He's got no his pedigree as a player, but no pedigree as a
No.
manager.
No.
So we've got the influence of Matt Busby from before, Dave, but in 1962, Revy starts to build this team, and it's all built around youth. We got Sprague, Lorimer, Bremner, I think, is already there, but it's this back four of which three are literally going to play for 10 years
Ever play forever.
straight. Yeah, so Sprake's the keeper, but Rainey, Jack Charlton's 27 at this point, so
Yeah.
he's the kind of
Elder
older
statesman.
older
Yeah.
head. Hunter
Yeah.
comes in next to him, aged 18. Johnson is the one that's the fullback that's not quite going to survive the
No.
amazing 10 years the others did. Talk to me about the Leeds youth, and talk to me about the partnership of Charlton and Hunter to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, Hunter was Charlton, very experienced, obviously brother of brother of Sir Bobby, and an out and out proper centre half. No frills, won everything in the air. Hunter comes in, I guess, as a as a sort of a raw youth, but could play. Lovely left foot. All right, we'll get onto the sort of like the steelier side of his game in a little bit, but yeah, could obviously play. And that it was going into that solid lead side, if you said, of Gary Sprake in goal, that back four, Paul Reaney, Jack Charlton, Hunter. And then latterly, you said Johnson, I think you said, was the left back. Latterly, Terry Cooper became left back, who's probably one of the best left backs, acknowledged as one of the best left backs, ever, probably, even including English left backs, even including the likes of, I don't know, latter years, Kenny Sansom, Ashley
Stuart
Cole.
Pearce.
Yeah, Stuart Pearce. I mean, Terry Cooper was up there. So, what a side. And then when you're adding to that, Peter Lorimer, Bremner's already there. A few seasons later, Johnny Giles, who's with Man U.
Well, should we do that, Dave? Because we get to the next season and Leeds win the second division. Terry Cooper comes into the team. Bremner has moved from a wide position into the midfield with Bobby Collins, and Johnny Giles gets signed. That's when in the second division. I mean, Bill Shankly is quoted as saying you can't play your way out of the second division; you have to claw your way out. Is this where the Dirty Leeds tag kind of comes from, that first promotion?
I say it's Dirty Leeds. They were just hard. I mean, all those players could play. I mean, Bremner, Giles, Collins, they could all play, but they just had that edge to them. Yeah, I think that steely edge to them, determination, will to win edge to them that, people, took as Dirty Leeds. That was perhaps an easy tag in latter years, but they were a lot more than that. I'd say a perfect blend. Given the steel they had in that team, absolute perfect blend to get up from the old second division.
And Dave, I get the idea that Revie was one of the first managers to you hear about the dossiers that Mourinho does 30 years later. One of the first managers to really look at the opposition and actually stopping them. And Hunter would have been sort of one of the perfect players to go to and say, here's the danger, snuff it out. In 64-65, they and we're going to talk about what Norman Hunter wins, but he actually could have ended up like Ryan Giggs or Phil Neal and just completely sweep the board. So this is the first
Leeds players.
near miss. They're going to lose on goal difference. The first season up.
Goal average then.
Goal average. Beg your pardon.
Yeah. Back then,
to Manchester United in George Best's first season there. So that will probably help your goal average. They're going to lose the cup final to a 117th minute Ian St John goal as well. So the first of many, many near misses. In 1965-66, Eddie Gray joins the team. But for Norman Hunter, it's the World Cup. He gets into the World Cup squad. He's only 22, Dave, and the back four has Bobby Moore partnering Jack Charlton with George Cohen. Wilson's the other fullback. Did it come too early for him, or is it just?
Well, it's Bobby Moore.
He's got a great player ahead of him.
He's got probably the greatest of them all, Bobby Moore. In that, well, we say Bobby Moore was really default because of Duncan Edwards. Let's talk about that. 4 years earlier, because of the demise of Duncan Edwards, who is widely acknowledged as being the greatest ever, probably arguably English player potentially. That gave Bobby Moore his chance, and then when Bobby Moore bought that '62 World Cup, Bobby Moore was just a class above. So he unfortunate there. He was very much in the shadow of Bobby Moore, and I know obviously Sir Alf liked that. Jack Charlton, as I said, Jack Charlton, the absolute stopper, the absolute shield at the back there, and Bobby Moore, who could obviously play. Otherwise, obviously, it would have been the Leeds combination, the natural club country sort of central defensive pair. But I mean, Bobby Moore was just on a plane above everything else.
It's interesting,
really.
Dave, when you hear players talk about, if you hear a Paul Cooper talk about Ray Clements and Peter Shilton, or if you hear a Jamie Carragher talk about Rio Ferdinand and John Terry, they're normally quite fine with this and say, oh, they were better players than me. It was their spot. Leeds are into Europe now. They finished fourth in the league in '67. They're going to lose in the. I'm going to call it the UEFA Cup final, but it's the Fairs Cup final. Jack Charlton wins Footballer of the Year that year alongside Norman Hunter. 67-68. The pragmatic tag is going to start to go because Mick Jones comes in as one of the front two. Terry Yorath comes in, and Leeds get silverware. They win the League Cup against Arsenal and win the Fairs Cup, UEFA Cup against Ferencvaros. Then in 68-69, Revy finally wins I say finally, he's taken them from the second division, for goodness sake. Dave, Norman Hunter plays all 42 games. Leeds keep 24 clean sheets.
Mad, isn't it? He plays. He actually plays. I did a little bit of research. I think he plays 42 league games for 5 consecutive seasons.
Ridiculous.
I mean, he is, as a centre
back.
But
Dave, 24 clean sheets shows that they haven't developed yet after the turn of the decade to what they're going to. But this championship is based on a back four that obviously you said Terry Cooper joining. That's now been honed solid, for 7 years. And classic confirmed as champions with a goalless draw at Anfield. So Yeah, 69-70. You add Alan Clark now, so the team's pretty much complete now with your goal scorer. Again, second in the league, lost in the FA Cup final. This is literally final after final.
I mean 1970. That was perhaps the first cup final I can absolutely remember. Vague memories of the cup final before. As we said before in the pod, cup final day was the biggest day in football. Throughout the year. And that's the first cup final. I remember one of the first cup finals. I think the first cup final will go to a replay as well. The famous cup final, and this is it, the famous cup final where the old Harrow schoolmaster David Ellery was once put in I don't know if you know this story. I might have recounted this before. This is a great story. Was once put in a room about, I don't know, say once, 15 years ago.
They've redone it with Michael Oliver.
Oh right, so they redid it with David Ellery and sat him in a room with the video at the time and said, referee this as you would today. So this was 15 years ago, and it was the Leeds Chelsea Cup replay at Old Trafford. And by the letter of the law, it was something like there would have been 14 players booked. Chelsea would have finished with 9, Leeds would have finished with 8.
I mean, it's even more ridiculous now. There was one player. I think it was. Does Dave Webb score the goal?
He does. Dave
Webb would have been sent off for a second booking on 13 minutes, apparently, in today's.
It's carnage. It's absolute. And of course, that
would
year,
Norman Hunter have been at the centre of this carnage?
He would have been involved. I think more. You'd have had nasty Johnny Giles and Brown. It's just horrible. Yeah. And that year, unfortunately, they came up against a machine that was Everton. I think Everton romped the league that year by about 7 or 8 points with the great Everton, well, Joe Royle, but the great Everton midfield of Harvey, Ball, Howard Kendall, the great Everton side.
Wow. We don't want to denigrate the style of all of these teams. It's a very...
Can I just add, don't forget, going into a World Cup in Mexico that season as well.
This is when we... It's ridiculous to compare it to 2020. It's 50 years before. The game was, 60-70% physical and 30%, technique.
I think you just got to look at, not only that, you look at the playing, you see the old match of the days and the old big matches and stuff like that. The playing surfaces were dreadful as well. You've got to factor that in as well, I think.
In 70-71... going to finish second again for the second out of 3 years. They're going to win the UEFA Cup again. So Norman Hunter becomes a 2-time European medalist against Juventus. 71-72. So there's lots to talk about here. They're going to win the FA Cup. We get the 7-0, famous 7-0, which I've literally just watched.
Can I just say, I think it's the year before where runners-up Arsenal. Yeah, Arsenal do the double the year before. You would love this. There's a bit of footage. They play West Brom at home. Okay. There's YouTube footage of this, and West Brom score an offside goal. West Brom score an offside goal. Everybody stops.
Oh yes, I have seen that. Yeah.
The brilliant, again, the genius that is Barry Davies, the Barry Davies commentary of that. We'll get on to another game in a minute. The Barry Davies commentary of that is, and Leeds will go mad.
Oh, it's scandalous, isn't it? And Revy goes crazy, doesn't he? Yeah. So we get the 7-0 win over Southampton. This team now, Dave, just because I know you're going to salivate. So this is the team that played in the cup final. Harvey.
Ben, I think again we should quickly say anyone who hasn't seen that on YouTube, just for an essence of that Leeds side, just watch that. And again, Barry Davis' commentary is just sensational on that.
Harvey in goal. So Reaney, Charlton, Hunter, Madeley. This midfield, Dave. Gray, Bremner, Giles, Lorimer, with Clark and Jones up front. 7 homegrown players in there. Talk to me about the balance of that team, and obviously we're focusing on Norman Hunter. And I've rewatched the 7-0, and all I could think of was the influence it had on Alex Ferguson, that 4-4-2
Yeah.
style, and the wide players, and
Yeah.
obviously the famous 39 passes. Who's the number 10? Is it Lorimer?
That's Johnny Giles.
Oh, is it absolutely taking the piss? He does a
flick
Rabona in
it up.
1970.
Yeah, Johnny Giles. And then Bremner and Giles are at the centre of it all. And then Bremner, little cheeky back heels and little no-look passes. That's ridiculous.
And Jack Charlton's up front for most of it, isn't he?
Well, I said there's one brilliant cross. I think I said yesterday when you texted me about it, there's one brilliant cross that I think Hunter puts in. Hunter's basically playing left wing, absolutely pings across, in which I think is the one that Lorimer heads back, and I'm doing it, and Mick Jones.
Hunter puts that cross in, does he?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic!
It's one of those. It's either an Eddie Gray one for that one, or a Hunter one where Charlton heads it in. It's one or t'other. I can't remember.
Incredible, absolutely incredible team, and that's the maybe if you looked at the 68-69 team where Hunter in the defence and the clean sheets were key. Now you've added the front two, and the midfield.
You hit the nail on the head. I think what you have to consider is the longevity of this team. It's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So Hunter himself plays 526 league games, 540 league games, something like 720 games in all. But that's not really it. Charlton 629 league games. Paul Reaney, I'm not sure these are league games. I think all total games 750. And Paul Madeley,
who played in every position,
was a bit of a utility player, the old-fashioned utility player. 536. I mean, he played virtually 1,000. It's
incredible, absolutely
Bremner,
incredible.
500 odd. Yeah, incredible.
72-73, third in the league. Losing the cup final again in the shock to Sunderland. Losing the Cup Winners' Cup amidst some, well, I think statute of limitations has run out on that now, hasn't it? Some dodgy refereeing, from what I know from my Leeds friends. Dave, we go to 73-74, and I always get upset when great players have their careers kind of defined over these sort of mistakes and whatnot. But Bobby Moore is kind of, his power is fading a bit now, and it's a high-profile mistake which Brian Clough defends in the TV coverage. But what was the kind of national perception of the mistake that Norman Hunter makes against Poland? Was he in the wrong place at the wrong time there?
Yeah, he was. I mean, he was pulled out to basically. If you see it back, you've obviously watched it. He's in a right back position. Because we're all over them. This is a game where Tomaszewski, who Clough famously calls a clown, I think, at half time, and he absolutely has. Well, probably the best goalkeeper display, other than ironically, the other one against Leeds was probably Jim Montgomery in the cup final, was the Sunderland Cup final, who basically Tomaszewski gets in the way of everything. Yeah, it's a ball played down the line. Hunter obviously is out of his comfort zone. As I said, he's all left foot, so absolutely in a right back position. Half-hearted for him, sort of goes to make the challenge, doesn't make it, the ball goes under his feet, and the rest, Lato breaks away, and I think Damarski puts in the goal, and which is England needed to win that game despite having something like, 29 shots to Poland's 2 or something, and about 30 corners.
We've all been there on Football Manager, Dave.
Yeah, which was the end of, which was the end of Alf Ramsey. Yeah, slightly sort of vilified, I think, in the press. But Christ, can you imagine today with social media? Oh my goodness me! So nothing ever like it is today. But if you sort of read a bit about Hunter, I think he carried that. That was virtually. I think he did play one game under Revy. I think he did once Revy was appointed. He played his last England game, I'm sure, I think it was Revy's first game. I think it was against Czechoslovakia. I think Hunter carried that burden with him probably for the rest of his career.
Interesting. And a certain favourite player of Ipswich fans sort of coming through at the same time in the centre back position.
Yeah, that would have had an effect. Yeah.
But more positively, Leeds win the title again. He plays all 42 games. Leeds don't lose a game for the first 29 games. And
Stoke City, I think.
but
Was
Dave now partnered by McQueen as
yeah,
Charlton is finished.
side.
Another good partnership. The defence concede 13 goals away from home all season.
Is that right? Oh my God, that's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. Yeah, Gordon McQueen, you'd think absolute like for Charlton. Absolute rock, big, tall rock, probably even more solid than Charlton. Again, Scottish international. Yeah, very much like for like. Would have slotted in there really.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah, go
Don Revie leaves for England. Brian Clough has his cup of tea as Leeds manager. Going to finish ninth. But what I want to talk to you about, Dave, is this is the season, and you mentioned this to me, where there's this Titanic, and sorry to go a bit Ipswich on it, FA
Well,
Cup quarter-final between Ipswich and Leeds. Have I got the right
well,
season, Dave?
yeah, you have. But what we should mention, 73-74, he actually wins the first inaugural PFA Player of the Year.
Yes, he does. Voted for Players Player of the Year. Yes,
First time. And the aforementioned Ipswich player wins the inaugural Young Player of the Year.
We're talking about Kevin Beattie, honestly.
Yeah,
and I don't want. David's a
Yeah.
brilliant historian. I don't want him to be known as the obituary guy. But if you're a fan of this time, go out of your way. Just type in Kevin Beattie, David Dymond into YouTube to hear Dave's amazing stuff.
Eulogy.
Yeah, on
cheers. No,
equally brilliant
Yeah.
centre half. Yeah. So yeah, talk to me about this FA Cup quarter final, and Norman Hunter played every minute of all the
It's
games.
just epic. So I went. I went to two. I went to the first one at Portman Road and the first one at Filbert Street. Couldn't get to the next one at Filbert Street. So that was a Titanic 0-0. First one at Portman Road was a 0-0. Biggest crowd, Leeds, but still a big draw, obviously. Biggest crowd ever at Portman Road, just over 38,000 at Portman Road. Obviously, you like this, just incredible, absolutely incredible. And yeah, still the nucleus of the great Leeds side, there. I thought probably Mick Jones not there. I seemed to remember Clark was still playing. Probably Joe Jordan up front with Clark back then.
Not bad replacement.
Hunter, McQueen, most of them are, looking at that team, most of them are still probably Cooper, not, but most of them still there. Yeah, just epic. And this was back in the good old days of the FA Cup when there was certainly no semblance of a penalty shootout. It went to the bitter end. So yeah, after four Titanic, and it really were Titanic games, we Ipswich come out on top in the second replay at Filbert Street. I can remember the first replay at Ellen Road. Ipswich are 1-up. I think David Johnson scores the first scores till about injury time, and then Duncan McKenzie scored. Absolutely heartbreaking. Not on TV, you're listening to it on the crackly radio and stuff like that. But brilliant games. And Leeds always brought massive support, as they still do. Absolutely massive support.
A strange sort of passing of the torch moment, that game, with Revie having gone to England and the next great English manager who's going to go on to manage England kind of coming through, kind of symbolic moment for
I think so.
English football management as well, isn't
it?
But we don't want to get all Ipswich on this.
Well, again, it's a little bit symmetry here because manager of Leeds during those games was Jimmy Armfield, who again was Norman Hunter's part of that England World Cup squad.
Brilliant lineage, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very controversially, again, I know Leeds fans are still pissed about this now. The European Cup finals in Paris, isn't it?
Well, what I remember about this is actually sort of, these are stupid memories that I think, I was 75, I was 11, 12, I think. And I remember just bumping into some Leeds fans. I don't know, I've been in town with my dad or something in the morning. We inadvertently bumped into some Leeds fans, and I probably had my Ipswich scarf on, but it's only good-natured banter. And I remember they were saying, well, we don't mind, well, no, I won't do the accent, but we don't mind if Ipswich win the cup because we're going to win the European Cup, sort of thing, And I think that they're just about to play Barcelona, because that's fantastic. Semi-final beat Barcelona. I think they'd just been drawn with Barcelona, were just about to play them, and they were saying, yeah, well, if we lose this, but at least we've got the European Cup, sort of thing. So that was, I remember that quite clearly.
Amazing. 75, 76, and a 33-year-old Norman Hunter famously fights with Franny Lee at the. Again, we don't want to boil a great player down to this, but just talk to me about this, because they just keep coming back, don't they?
They can't
Incredible.
leave it alone. I mean, it's a pretty good. I've got to say. I mean, they both Leeds thrown some pretty good
Yeah,
right
you'd think
hooks
the
there.
fight would be quite one-sided, wouldn't you? But it's
Yeah, you
not.
would. No, he gets in there. It's again that just sums up football back to how it was in the 70s. It's the classics at the baseball ground derby and the pitch is like a bloody meadow
And
and
Dave, this is a two-time champions derby in the
yeah,
70s
yeah,
as
yeah,
well, and a
yeah,
great
absolutely.
player, Franny Lee,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
So again, and don't forget, certainly 71, 72, they just edged Leeds out by a point or so. So great rivalry, and still, obviously, perhaps the overhang of the Leeds, the whole Leeds and Derby Clough thing still hanging there
Yeah.
in the air. I mean, it's there. I mean, don't forget. Also, I remember the Charity Shield. This isn't Norman Hunter of 2 seasons before.
Oh,
Again,
Keegan
Leeds,
and Bremner.
really Bremner and Keegan having it out on the pitch. And the famous one where they take the shirts off and stuff like that. So,
Keegan is
Leeds
ripped.
could play, but could dish it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that kind of signals the end of his Leeds career. He moves to Bristol City and Barnsley. But, Dave, here's the numbers. Look, 726 games for Leeds, wins a World Cup, 2 championships, an FA Cup, a League Cup, 2 UEFA Cups, and a PFA Player of the Year. And as we've gone through all of those second places and
Could have won at least 5. Could have won at least
finals,
5 titles easily.
but still, even without all of that, just incredible.
And not the small amount. I think it was 28 England caps. So yeah, as I said, as pretty much understudy to in his peak years as understudy to Bobby Moore. So yeah, fantastic career really.
Managed at Barnsley, got them promoted.
Yeah.
Had spells at Rotherham and Bradford. Before you tell us a little story about you actually met Norman Hunter.
Yeah.
Just sum him up as a player.
Yeah, hard as nails, but could play left foot. Silky left foot. I wouldn't say a bit like, and I don't want to compare. And I'm not as an Ipswich fan comparing him to Beattie. Not the explosive pace, I would say, but just sort of calm, steady. Like I said, cultured left foot. Hard as effing nails.
Dave, how much was the Revie success built on that back four?
Yeah, longevity.
Charlton
Just the
and
longevity. Look at the longevity of it, for Christ's sake. Yeah, the only real change they made, as you alluded to there, was obviously Charlton ultimately retired, replaced with Gordon McQueen, but the goalkeeper Gary Sprake sort of moved on, I think, to Birmingham, and they, David Harvey, great goalkeeper in his own right, came through. Just incredible. And I think you should also, when he left Leeds, October 76, went to Bristol City.
120 games.
After that, so they were still playing top level. Bristol City had got promoted, so Bristol City were playing in the top division. Certainly for, I'd say, two or three of those seasons. Yeah, absolutely fantastic career, and just a key part of that. Do you know, it's weird what I remember about just little things about Leeds, and I think this used to wind up people back in those days. And you would have seen it from everyone who hasn't seen it. The Brian Clough, the Michael Sheen, Damned United film is just absolutely up there. A brilliant film. Obviously, which categorises, Clough's time at Leeds. But the thing that you catch about, Leeds were the first team to run out with their names on the back of the tracksuits. Leeds were the first team to have you'd have noticed this, the little sock ties with the little numbers on the sock ties.
Which were given to the crowd after games.
Yeah.
And they,
Just little things like that Revie brought in that I think just used to whine,
But Dave, I think he was trying to do that as as good marketing, and it, like you said,
wow. Not to say it backfired, but really, look at Leeds, But great manager, great side, great player.
And you met him, Dave?
I did. So in latter years, he was there. He would do a bit like Walkie does and Milts used to do before Mick Stockwell does it now at Ipswich.
This is John Walker and Simon Milton.
Sorry. The meet and greet, the match they hosted, the meet and greet. So it was, and you, I know it's just been covered this on our own pod, but the great season after we Ipswich were promoted back into the Premier League in 2000. So one of the first away games was Leeds away. And this is a bit of a key game in that season because we'd had a half decent start. I think we'd won 3. We've spoken about this match before, certainly with Stat, my other colleague. We'd won 1 and lost 3 and maybe drawn 1. So away at Leeds, And I go with my mate Pat, who gets corporate. He got a corporate seat. We drove up there. I go in, and yeah, Norman Hunt is the match day host. So yeah, got to meet him, got to say hello, and I'm sure I did. I mean, look, it's 20 years ago now, but I'm sure I did say, oh, love that. Love watching you and that Leeds side. Lovely guy, lovely man, gentleman, and the game made even better because I think obviously Ipswich won 2-1 that day. But and I think we went back afterwards, and again he was quite magnanimous and said, oh, obviously early days said, oh, you play like that, you'll be fine, But obviously, yeah, ultimately we were. But yeah, just a nice sort of came across nice, gently spoken man. Not that big, didn't yeah, obviously not that big a guy, but yeah. So that was kind of nice.
Incredible stuff. So, I hope that's kind of gone over well. So Norman Hunter, who died yesterday, sadly, of the
Yeah.
coronavirus, aged 76, Dave, right in that vulnerable
I think
people's bracket
someone
as
else
well.
again. I think Leeds fans of a certain vintage would acknowledge this as well. Again, out of the terrible coronavirus, I'd also like to mention Peter Bonetti, that also died, the Chelsea keeper last weekend. Who again, a little bit of symmetry there with Hunter was a member of the 1970 World Cup squad. The cat Bonetti. Sadly, someone else who's succumbed to to coronavirus.
Yeah, it's a strange time. It's a difficult time, and it's taking these kind of heroes who are like I say vulnerable to it, and you wouldn't ever use the word vulnerable to describe someone like Norman Hunter. But there you go. Dave, thank you so much for that. I hadn't planned to do it, but as soon as we started sort of messaging, I thought, oh no, I'm going to enjoy this. As I say, go out of your way to, if you're a younger fan, there's the 72 Cup finals on YouTube. The 7-0 against Southampton is on YouTube. You can find the Poland clips and the fight with Franny Lee. We're in lockdown. Go out of your way to watch the Damned United. And as I say, if you are a fan of that time, Dave's stuff on Kevin Beattie, who there's certain parallels of the time they played and the position they played between the two players. If you're a Leeds fan or any fan, get your comments in on Norman Hunter. Again, we come from a position of massive respect and apologise. We're not Leeds fans if we got any information, the wrong year on something.
Hopefully not.
Yeah, the wrong year on something. But Dave, thank you so much, and we'll say the last word. Norman bites your leg, Hunter, who died yesterday, aged 76.
Rest in peace.